So you want to paint your room the fastest way possible while you're in the right place, because we've put together a system that saves a lot of time and is really efficient. And this way we can actually paint one whole room like this in one day. First step is to prep, get everything out of the floor space into the middle of the room, all the big items that we can't move. For example, the bed, we just plopped it in the center of the room and then we covered it with a plastic drop sheet. The other thing we like to do is take all the smaller items, put them into another room so we've maximized the floor space. And then the next step is to put all our drop sheets down on the floor. So we cover the entire floor surface area. Take a flathead screwdriver and take off all your receptacle covers as well as your switches, and take away the curtain rod, anything that's going to be on the walls, like any pictures, of course, they need to come down. Take the light fixture, loosen off the screws a little bit, and then let it hang from the ceiling, because that way we can paint around it really fast.
Take your metal butt edge of the putty knife and use a bit of wrist action on those imperfections plus a scrape. Then your Sheetrock 20 compound is what we prefer in a mud pan with some water. Give that a good mix and add more water as needed until you've got a runny toothpaste-like consistency. Give your mud pan a flip, make sure nothing falls out, and you're good to go. Now apply using this technique once over and then a 45-degree angle, and that will ensure that it is good to go. And lastly, give your wall a quick sand down and it will be ready for paint.
Okay, so that pretty much summarizes the prep work, and now we will get into the ceiling painting first, and we'll show you the system that makes the magic happen. So I got a pro tip for you guys. When painting your ceilings, I like to wear a hat because that'll keep the paint off your head. So if you come over here, I'll show you the setup we like to use. This is known as a gorilla ladder. It's basically a 4-foot platform, and you can easily get on and off. It makes your workflow much more efficient because you can span this entire distance without moving the ladder, so you don't have to constantly get up and down from a ladder. Now we've got what's called a Pelican here. It's like a version of a handy pail, but it's specially designed for a mini roller, and you can load up your paint and then you can take away the excess, and then once it's fully loaded on your roll, this is a microfiber mini roll, by the way. I like to start in the corner, just jam it in there. Don't worry about getting any paint on the wall because we are going to be painting that, but you can see how quickly I can cut my ceiling now. The only thing I'll say is be careful. You don't want any paint that accumulates too much. You can always go back over it with the nose of the mini roll like so, because you don't want to get drips. That's a big no-no. Just look out for the drips, but otherwise you can get right into the workflow. It's super fast this way. It's a lot of fun. In my experience, the best way of painting a whole room. Sir Stefan right here, this gentleman, he has a fine point to make, and that is that when you're actually painting your ceiling, in the case that it's oil base, you want to make sure you're not using this technique, and if you are, you can sand it after. Why? Because if you're using, for example, water-based paint for the walls and an oil-based paint for the ceiling, you'll run into issues when you go to paint your walls. Now, I would say 80 to 90% of paints on the market these days are water-based technology paints. What I'd like to demonstrate for you guys is how we do the corners. So we like to hit the corner, put pressure on this side of the roll here, and then jam it in. And don't be afraid to use enough paint here because, like I say, you come back around and you just get rid of any excess. And that is how we do the corner. So next step, once you've done the perimeter with your mini roll and your handy pail, is to get one of these guys here. This is an extension pole, and invest in a good quality roller, because there's some cheap rollers and you want to avoid those. They bend here. This is a solid frame construction. This one's by Wooster, so is this, and you want to use microfiber. That's what we prefer. I don't like those nap rollers, pardon me, not the nap, the lint rollers, because they leave little pieces of lint. I think these are far superior. And so we load it up in our tray box with a liner, and then we start in the corner and we simply roll it out like so. And you want to keep the roll ahead of you. So you can see how I'm not letting it go over my head, because then I'm getting paint in my hair, my face, and also I'm breaking my back like this. You don't want to do that. You want to stay the roll ahead of you and just walk with it and roll it out. And then that's the first coat done. We let that dry for an hour or two, and then we come back and we recoat the whole thing. Same technique, starting with the mini roll and the Pelican. Roll it out around the perimeter and then fill it in with your roll. All right, so once your ceiling's been coated twice, now it's time to paint the baseboard and the door trims, and also the window trims too. And when we paint them, we don't worry about getting a little paint on the walls because we leave that till last. Now that the ceiling paint's drying, we'll paint the baseboard and trim and then fill in the walls at the very end. So one final thing I want to mention to you guys about the baseboards here is when you're painting them, you don't need to actually go down right to the floor, because that's when you get paint on the floor. You can go to about within 1/8 of an inch. They're coated well enough that when you stand up and you're looking at your baseboard, you're never going to see that there's like a sliver, a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch that, you know, is not painted, because look at where our eye level is. It's not worth the hassle to get right to the floor, because you're going to get a lot of paint on the floor. I would just do it that way if I were you. It's the quickest way to do it. It's also professional, and it'll save you a ton of time. Now it's time to do your walls at last. And I like to use this mini roll here. I'm a really big fan of using this where I can because it saves so much time. So check this out. Right in the corner there, just like we did the ceiling, nice and quickly, no compromise on quality. Love that. So once you've rolled in all 4 corners, now you can take your brush and get up on your Gorilla Ladder and do your ceiling cuts first, because this is all dry now. The baseboard and the trim is still drying, so we do our ceiling cut first. So the way we load up our brush is get it nice and wet, scrape off any excess, have quite a bit of paint still on there, and we hold it like this. And then you see this angle here, we apply it using that angle to our advantage. And we get in, find a groove, lock in, and then you just go all the way. And then you come back and you fill in the rest. And the only time you ever go like this is after you've put your paint on the wall, then you can fill it in a little thicker. That way you don't need to get as close when it's time to roll it. Voila.